Hello, how does I hope the power doesn't go out, but it might. But good morning. It is 12:48 a.m. right now, and I'm recording because I actually started watching the videos of someone here on YouTube talking about the possessions of a Kundalini spirit, and I'm interested in minding the different understandings that other people have, because I remember when I started doing yoga. Not even when I started doing yoga. It's actually before I even started doing yoga. I used to hear people say, "Oh, yoga's evil. Yoga's evil," and I used to think, how can yoga be evil? Like, how is yoga negative? How can it be bad? Like, I didn't understand it because to me, I viewed it as a physical practice, and also a mental practice, one that can facilitate mindfulness, such because it helps you perform movements. The same movements that I perform in yoga are the same movements which I perform in other areas of my life, and it helped to improve my functionality. So I used to wonder, like, how can yoga be a bad thing? How can it be evil? When the practice of yoga literally is about fostering benevolence in the self and onto others. I'm getting a message for something I didn't know I had an account with. I have to check on that. Um, and so I was going to leave a response, which sort of turned into a long review that I did not feel important to offer in their space, being that I understand that they're coming from a different place. And I actually was reading some of the comments, and I actually think they're absolutely valid in their understanding of yoga being something which can lead to possession, or it can lead to negative spirits or encounters or expressions of the self, because I am a firm believer that what you do with your body can express the psyche in different ways. And so some people who have asked me, and it depends on who you are, who you're as a person who is asking me what I'm going to respond, how I'm going to respond to you and tell you when you inquire about performing yoga, getting into your own yoga practice. And what I always stress to the person is have your own practice, because you, just like anything else, like if someone is talking about finance and managing your bank account, it's important to understand what's important to you most. It's important to understand what you are capable of doing and what you're absolutely not capable of doing. So, in the same way that we look upon practicing spirituality, performing religious duties, or adhering to any other examples of lifestyle, we have to know first with ourselves what is okay and what is not okay. So when you talk about performing a yoga practice, I think it's absolutely important to be mindful of who you are, what you want to achieve, and what you're not going to deal with. And so for myself, I actually stopped performing yoga because I was having some of the experiences that people were talking about that lets them say that it's evil, or that it's negative, or that it's not a human necessity. Because I was having things come up for my psyche. And what I was saying was that I am a believer that what you do in the body can excise different energies. So that's why I actually believe, I actually got to some Elliot Halls and him saying, pay attention to the word itself: exercise, excise, exorcism, so on and so forth. They're kind of related, but I am a firm believer in that exercising the body also exercises the mind and the psyche in all its different levels and subconscious performances and the conscious performances which we have. So when you move both the body, mind, and the spirit body at one time, you have to have a personal alignment with yourself and understanding that you're doing that. You're not just manipulating a limb, you're manipulating the muscles that you have, which might contain genetic information or psychological information. So right now we're going to focus on the psyche. There were two books I have, which I have not finished reading because I read a little bit at a time, and then I literally chew and chew and chew on those same pieces of information for years. But those two books, also recommended by Elliot Hulse, was one of them was recommended by Elliot Hulse, and the book that I read alluded to another book by the author, and that was Bioenergetics and betrayal of the body. And what I was finding within those books, and bioenergetics is about the process of biological energy that the body contains. And so I'm a believer that when you move your body, you're freeing yourself up from fear. But the thing is, when you free yourself up from fear, you start addressing concerns and matters that you were not addressing before. You start to register things in your environment or within the internal environment that you were not addressing and or felt courage to address before. So when you talk about doing yoga, which is not just moving the body, but it's also moving the breath, and the breath we know gives us life, and that is from that life, that is the stream of energy and life that we were given when we were given breath by God. So when you talk about moving the body, moving all the waters, moving the wood, moving the fire, moving all these different elements that exist within the body, you're talking about manipulating also your external environment. And when you start manipulating the spiritual environment, you're going to start facing different qualities of light and darkness, or different qualities of good and bad, benevolence and malevolence. And for many of us, we're used to dealing with a certain set of circumstances. And once we get in a groove, you know, it's kind of difficult to start accepting different challenges. So I actually stopped doing yoga for many reasons, but one of the reasons was because I got tired of being psychologically upset. I got tired of being blindsided by my psyche showing me memories which were repressed through the stiffness, rigidity of my body, because the stiffness and rigidity of my body was also rewarding the stiffness and rigidity of my emotions. It was also rewarding the stiffness and rigidity of my mentality. But once I started to open up my body, I opened up my mind, and I opened up my psyche, and things started coming to me that I, at a time, was excited to deal with, because I was young. I got tired of feeling stuck in a rut with my emotions, and I got tired of feeling stuck in a rut with my psychology, my psychological mind and my spiritual mind, because I was literally stuck. I was rigid. I didn't have movement in my fascia. I didn't have movement that could allow me to perform certain physical movements. And because of that physical rigidity or lack of consciousness or my awareness of myself, I didn't take upon certain challenges in my life. I didn't feel safe going in certain areas, so I absolutely didn't go there. But once I started to feel safe, I started going into places that had new challenges and required different response abilities. If you understood that, right? I didn't even mean to say that, but it just happened. So I actually started writing something, and I'm actually going to read off of that so that I can stay a little bit on topic. I cannot attest for yoga in all others' lives. However, I can speak to yoga in my life. And let me sort of give a disclaimer that I am not a follower of others' teachings simply upon the basis of who they are or what they say a thing is for. Whenever I do anything, I'm also I'm also minding what it's actually doing to me. Now, I'm not always on top or on time, because sometimes my senses are dulled. However, I do usually come around to that point. So I find my own answers in all that I do. So as a child, I practiced gymnastics, but it is not advised to go back into 100%, after years of absence from it. So, and I also found a similarity between yoga poses and capoeira, which I also practice. So over the years, I have utilized yoga for various reasons, like eliminating acid reflux, gas, and assisting the issues I had with my back problem. I have a back issue, but doing yoga actually helped me overcome it. So the issue, which I used to experience once every single month, is now something I might experience twice a year. I'm so grateful for that. So being a conscious user of yoga, I have used it as a means of aligning myself with the concerns of an aging body, such as learning how to fall or how not to fall by learning how to balance. Eliminating fear of the ability to catch myself when I fall, to eliminate the fear of the body so that it cannot have commandment over me as my consciousness begins to waver. Sometimes the mind is not 100% of activity. And what I was finding was that my body was doing things regardless of where my mind was. And I said, no, I need to figure this out. So now I can almost get my body to do things without having to be fully awake or aware, because I got tired of feeling like something else was controlling me, or there was a part of me that I wasn't aware of, and it was living its whole life without my awareness. I didn't like that. I felt like there was a background process that was occurring, and yoga helped me to sort of access that from the back door and to sort of reprogram what was going on. So I no longer felt that I was being ruled by by the subconscious activity that was occurring. But that can be a daunting task for some people to take on. The thing is, for myself, I am a very intellectual person, so I can be cold in areas where other people might be emotional or alarmed. So I do tell people to be careful because it can excise things for you. So reading off again, I said, I have used yoga to steer my rod, but I cannot say that there's no truth to what I've witnessed some of my peers say. That yoga is evil, it evokes a unkind spirit, and that it evokes sensual cravings. Because it can, and it does, and it will. However, I believe just like there anything else, you get power. It is up to you to wield it properly. So someone can give you a title of a position which gives you power over many people in your company. It's not evil to have power, but it is important for you to be mindful of how you are using it and to be mindful of how that power is using you. So Oh, and I also have utilized yoga to strengthen my constitutions, if you understand what I mean by that. So I am aware of the pockets of the mind which so operate without a person's knowledge. I have experienced that, and it haunted me. So I delved into yoga to eliminate fear of my unknowns and to know them and to gain an ability to surrender them over to higher benevolent powers. So what I learned for myself was this: if you are not settled in your psyche or in your spirit, yoga can infect you with the many horrors of your past, present, or future fears. I began, like I said, I began reading a book called Bioenergetics, which is about the biological energy which lives in the body. I operated, while performing yoga, I operated with an understanding that what I do in my body has power to influence my mind and my spiritual cavities. So I was under no illusion of what moving or exercise could do. Exercise will literally excise both benevolent. Started doing yoga, I actually got creeped out a little bit by some of the things which had started happening. It made me more conscious of who I allowed around me because I became more attuned to myself and more sensitive. And once I became more sensitive, I recognized I became like a magnet. So like some magnets pick up dust because they're so strong and so sensitive, and other magnets are almost dull. They can only pick up heavier, certain type objects. And recognizing that, I said, okay, I have to learn how to shield myself, or how to at least back away from these spaces which I can occupy and give me all this power that I do not want to wield right now. So personally, I think there's an issue here, and so I have to be mindful to look at it very carefully. I view the culture surrounding yoga in America similarly to how I view CrossFit. And then if anybody's familiar with the culture of CrossFit, there is a sector of individuals who are very unhealthy, who like to do everything into their vomiting and will, break stuff, break parts of their body and just say, oh, well, it'll be okay. I'm not one of those people who like to go hard in any regard. I don't go to the gym in order to hurt myself. If I get sore, I'm not interested. If it hurts, I'm not interested, because you know what? I want to be able to wake up in the morning and continue on with my life. So I don't do things to the extent that others do it and say this is normal. I don't normalize for myself what other people normalize for themselves. Okay. So I view the culture surrounding American yoga similarly to how I view CrossFit, that there is a culture of excess and harm. This is a cultural phenomenon of personal ignorance and the surrendering of personal power that I do not agree with, nor endorse, practice, or follow. When people come to me asking about performing yoga, I most likely would advise them to take their time and to remove the ego, because you doing yoga, it can make you feel real good, but you also have to be mindful of who and all that you are. And you have to understand that this vehicle is not simply your own. You are along for a ride, and it's up to you who you give that vehicle to. And so if you're not mindful of your utilization of this vehicle, you can and absolutely will surrender it to the wrong energies. So you have to be mindful of that. So I actually have very rarely practiced in a public gym. I don't practice in a public gym. I don't pray with everybody. I don't do everything that everybody else is doing, especially if everybody else is doing, I'm definitely going to go away from it, So, um, yoga can break you as easily as haphazardly lifting weights in the gym. But you have to understand, yoga is flexing a different muscle. It's flexing the internal muscles. Yoga can influence you to be something which you are unable to recognize. I have not known how to properly communicate with my peers the duty which yoga will bestow upon you over the self. And we must understand in the mind that yoga is not simply a matter of poses. If you further research yoga, we will find that there is an educational quality to performing the sutras and to not be misled by marketing exploitations, which only ever provide surface information. Come to know your own personal qualities, and then we cannot blame others for our being misled. So, like I said, you have to understand why there are different types of yogas. Who was the teacher who created this yoga? When you perform a salutation or something, you have to be mindful of what it is that you are personally manipulating when you perform those movements. It's not for everybody, and it's not for all the time. Yoga can exercise that which has found its place within you. I stopped committing to yoga because I got tired of what it stirred up in my psyche. It made me emotionally vulnerable due to how I opened up physically and released old and stagnant energy. It brought up old psychological traumas and memories. It brought up things which I had not dealt with but had become buried in my body and in my mind, which promoted a physical stiffness or rigidity. I started to learn about the correlation between the amount of energetic output, or in other words, the recruitment and utilization of energy in my physical body, and the vulnerability of my mind when I stretched and awakened fascia, which hadn't been massaged and moved in some time. So what I'm saying is, you ever see somebody and you're like, oh, why he look like that? Why he so stiff? Some people, they cave in at the chest because they don't have a certain, I don't want to say pride as in the evil pride, but they don't have a certain pride in themselves to sit up straight tall and feel safe doing this. You ever see some people, they physically look like how they emotionally are. So the thing is, you don't want to overtrain anything. Some people overtrain in yoga. They overtrain the spirit. They abuse the spirit through the practice of yoga. I did that too. I kept trying and kept trying. And I thought, well, it's not hurting my physical body, so it's okay. But I didn't understand that psychologically and spiritually, I was overstretching. I was overbending. I was doing way too much. Maybe I needed to be still, or maybe I needed to pursue another practice, which like I said, I have done. So what I'm saying is to practice a healthy yoga, which is a yoga which helps you embody a better, more magnificent version of yourself. And I do believe that when you perform yoga, there must be peace in the emotions and in the body and in the mind, because when you start moving that body, it will awaken things. So one example of unhealthy yoga is a yoga practice which leaves you depressed constantly. Another version of unhealthy yoga is a yoga practice which hurts your body versus assisting you in your life. Like, for example, I stopped going to the gym because I didn't like the equipment, because I found that the machines were not helping me in the long run, at least not to perform at least not with a practice which should allow me to perform more complex movements versus one which had more limited mobility. So going to the gym, you see a lot of things on machines. And so you got straight this, straight that, everything's in a straight line, everything's in a straight line. But you also understand some of those people lack the roundedness. They lack, the ability to lift their own body weight because they're constantly using machines which assist them in doing things, I'm going to say it incorrectly, because the truth of the matter is, out in the real world, lifting a weight is not a matter of a set path, straight this, straight this. It's fluid. It can move anywhere. That weight could be moving. It could be influenced by the wind. I can lift my dog up and have something else in the other hand. So sometimes I practice training with unequal weight, but you'll hear some people say, don't do that. It causes imbalances. It's like, no, I'm training for myself and for my life, right? And you're also assuming I don't already have an imbalance, which I need to correct. So I do maintain, however, that the gym does have its place for creating a set or solid path of stable muscular recruitment for the body to follow. So if and when I ever do need to use that straight path, that narrow movement, I have it. However, I'm also pretty well-rounded, like the shoulder joints. We see a lot of people lift weights and they always do this, and then they do that, and then they do that. There's rarely ever this. They rarely ever fully exercise that joint. And so what happens is they build imbalances because they're constantly overworking one section of the muscle over the others. So when you do stuff like maybe go to a gymnastics gym where I'm pointing because I have some gymnastics rings over here, and you work on gymnastics ring, now you're working on utilizing the stabilizer muscles in a more beneficial manner versus straight rigid paths. You understand what I'm saying? But I'm kind of going off the path, so let me return to the core of this conversation. So in terms of my view regarding yoga, I do still utilize some of the postures and flows, as it has helped me to eliminate acid reflux, gas, and an ability to trust in my body. However, after understanding the power of yoga to induce spirits of harm, I start performing yoga as it is most commonly advertised. I do not agree to perform yoga or to being guided through it with just any and everybody. The same as it's the same as I do not agree to prayer with just any and everybody. I recognized that for myself, practicing yoga gave me the understanding of living life with limits. Why is it important to have limitations and to respect limitations and to enjoy them? I recognize for myself, I have a choice in how much crap I put up with and how I'm personally inviting it or creating it or minding it. It gave me an ability to review my involvement of the happenings of my own life, to understand what was coming on to the surface and into view, and how I could evolve those things to suit my needs versus those things commanding me. So there are mistakes involved. Harm can come upon the unknowing persons. And I will say it is similar to being in the gym. Some people will say, oh no, never perform these movements, but they're speaking as someone who is not in my realm of athleticism. They're speaking to someone who has a limited range of motion. They're speaking to someone who has broken their arm or their body, and so they can't do what I do, and so they say it's bad. So they don't have my years of practice and preparation, or they don't have a need for performing the movements that I'm able to perform. So I tell people you can perform those movements, but understand what they are for, why you're performing it, and what place they should have in your practice. And you have to understand, you have to balance. They say, like, you ever watch a commercial on TV and they say this is part of a healthy, this is nutritional and great as a part of a healthy and balanced diet. A lot of us don't have healthy and balanced diets, and so we gorge ourselves on things which are not healthy, and then get mad and blame them for our lack of health. No, if you already have a healthy and balanced diet, you will know how to monitor your intake of crap. You will know that it's okay every once in a while to have a little bit of stuff that ain't good for you, because, I'm not going to go into that. That's a different conversation. But, if you have a healthy and balanced diet, then a little bit of this and a little bit of that should not be a great harm to you. However, if you do not have a healthy and balanced diet, you do not eat that. A lot of us don't have it, and then we want to blame McDonald's for what we choose to do 4 days out the week. So when it comes to yoga, I think the issue is that a lot of practices have been sensationalized. A lot of practices have been overly generalized for the public, when they are more of a specialty and personal practice. For example, I can bend and twist my arms, back, and legs in ways that many men my age cannot, and not expected to be able to do. But what most people don't know when they make that assessment about me is that I was a child athlete with a foundation in gymnastics. So I can do things on command that others might take months or years to work up to. So when performing yoga, it is important to be influenced from within the self, to take upon any activity with respect to your own spiritual foundation as it is currently, but also in light of what is desired for the future, or not even desired, what is necessary. Can yoga evoke evilness? Most certainly. Can yoga evoke benevolence? I believe that is what it was intended to do. Is it for everybody? I cannot decide for you, but in my humble opinion, no. There are those amongst us who are spiritual warriors who take on tasks which are difficult and trifling for others who are so viewing from the outside. However, I know for myself, I depend on having a deeper amount of spiritual, emotional clarity than some of the people around me. And I do this because I am a seer. I am also someone who translates messages. I'm a lot of things, okay? So I do that because I receive a lot of messages that sometimes contend with the psychological training that I have. So I understand I have to unarm myself in order to receive the message. So I will do what I have to do in order to bring clarity in my body in order to receive better a vision. So if and when I'm having difficulty receiving a message because it is clouded and foggy or surrounded in the strife that is in my psychological history, I have to do the work of clearing that up in order to receive the message so that I can translate it and so that I can deliver it. So I know that I have some cleansing to do. So yoga is one of those tools, just like drinking water or fasting or limiting my diet or even opening up my diet, right? But I always suggest people to be grounded in all your practices before you start yoga, and that's with anything. So now I'm back on the screen and I see some interaction here. Do you feel like it feeds negative energies? Do you feel like it feeds negative energies? Do I feel like yoga feeds negative energies? Yes and no. I think I answered that in everything that I just said, but do I feel like it feeds negative energies? Yes and no. I believe that it's per person basis. It can hurt you if you are not someone who is aware of the psyche of yourself. I do believe it can be rewarding to you. Like myself, I'm a very intellectual person. So when it comes to spiritual and emotional things, I know how to take a step away from it oftentimes so that I can make a proper assessment about myself and I can properly navigate through these things, which for other people are terrible things to do. I've done things that some people I would not suggest other people to do. But there are people amongst, around us who have done even greater feats than I've been able to accomplish in my life. So you said prayer can also be feeding negative spiritual energies. I actually have no comment on that. I don't like to speak generally anymore. I try my best not to do that. I will say I respect your input. But I think everything comes down to the individual and what is your necessity. In my life, I was birthed into the necessity of spiritual, emotional depth, and I was given the gift to navigate these things such that I can assist the beings around me in navigating what they might experience. Now, I'm not here to assist to everybody. No, absolutely not. But I was sent here to do what it is that I was sent here to do. And so I have learned to utilize yoga so that I can be more calm, so that I can watch my ego, so that I can, like some people, I actually wrote a status. I said, some people count calories. I measure pleasure. So for myself, I measure how much influence I'm receiving. I measure how much how the rush of endorphins I'm experiencing and how that can influence my choices and take away from my ability to be mindful and to be analytical. So I think it depends on the person. If that's not a calling for your life to be so aware, then don't do it. I absolutely do not suggest everybody do yoga. If you want to know a couple of poses to help yourself with your back problems, then absolutely do it. But I will also suggest, different exercise routines. I'm going to suggest to you a whole lifestyle change. I'm not going to tell you that one thing is going to fix all of your problems. I'm actually going to suggest that you do multiple things in your life in order to assist the goals that you are trying to achieve. But sometimes people have come to me with goals and I say that's not realistic and it's not necessary. You want to do something you saw an Olympian do. You don't need to do the things that an Olympian is doing because you're not on their level. So I think I've said enough. I appreciate your viewership. I do hope that we can talk some more. Mwah.